Ryan laughed out loud on the mat. "I'll give you my black belt if you can take me down." Sarah, the custodian, tied her hair back with steady hands. What happened in the next 30 seconds made the entire gym fall silent. Before we start today's story, let me know where you're watching from. Go ahead and grab a coffee or get comfy on the couch. And please don't forget to support us. All you have to do is hit that like button, and I'll know you enjoy this kind of story. So you ready? Let's get started. The Dragon's Den Dojo was known throughout the city as the Temple of Martial Arts. Its walls displayed golden trophies, champions' belts, and photos from international competitions. It was where the best fighters in the region gathered to train, compete, and most importantly, to be seen. Sarah arrived every day at 5 in the morning, when the dojo was still empty and silent. In her simple uniform and worn-out sneakers, she moved unnoticed through the halls that would soon be filled with athletes. Her work was invisible but essential, cleaning the mats, organizing the equipment, and ensuring everything was perfect for when the real practitioners arrived. As she wiped down the mirrors, she observed the movements that still echoed in her memory from the previous evening. Every punch, every kick, every takedown technique was recorded in her mind like a secret library of martial knowledge. No one knew that. When she got home, she practiced every move she had seen, turning the small living room of her apartment into her own dojo. "Mom, you're going to be late for work," said Lily, her 12-year-old daughter, appearing in the kitchen still in her pajamas. The girl had inherited her mother's determined eyes and a curiosity that made her question everything around her. "I'm on my way, sweetheart. There's lunch money on the table, and don't forget to lock the door when you leave for school." Sarah kissed her daughter's forehead and grabbed the old backpack where she carried her cleaning supplies. For 3 years, ever since Lily's father had abandoned them, that job was all they had. It wasn't much, but it was honest, and that was enough. At the dojo, and things started to pick up around 7. The first to arrive were always the most dedicated, professional athletes training before work, young people dreaming of competitions, and a few veterans who made martial arts their philosophy of life. Among them all, Ryan stood out not just for his skill, but for the arrogance he wore like his black belt. At 28, he had collected regional and national titles and made sure everyone knew it. His presence changed the energy of the place. Conversations stopped, eyes turned to him, and even the instructors seemed more attentive when he was around. "Sarah, mat number 3 has a spot on it," he yelled from across the room, pointing to a place that was clearly clean. She approached in silence, checked the immaculate mat, and began wiping it again, even knowing it wasn't necessary. Ryan laughed along with 2 of his friends who were watching the scene. "That's how it's done. Hierarchy, people. Everyone in their place." The comment echoed through the dojo, creating a palpable awkwardness. Some students looked away, others laughed nervously. Sarah continued her work as if nothing had happened, but her muscles tensed, almost imperceptibly. This kind of humiliation was nothing new. Ryan had made a sport out of provoking the woman he considered inferior. To him, she represented everything he despised. People with no ambition, who were content with simple jobs, who would never seek the excellence he believed he possessed. What he didn't know was that every night after Lily was asleep, Sarah would go down to the building's basement. There, among old boxes and abandoned equipment, she had created her own training space. Using old videos she found online and recalling every technique she observed during the day, she practiced with a discipline few professional athletes possessed. It wasn't just exercise. It was her way of staying strong, of processing the day's frustrations, of remembering she was more than what people saw. Every movement was a small, silent rebellion against a world that insisted on underestimating her. The morning followed its usual rhythm. Intense training, sweat on the mats, the distinct sound of strikes in the air. and Sarah, always present but always invisible, observing everything with eyes that held secrets no one could imagine. The morning's training was particularly intense. Ryan dominated the center mat, executing a sequence of strikes that impressed even the most experienced instructors. His technique was flawless, the result of years of dedication and countless hours of practice. But with his skill came an arrogance that bothered many, though few had the courage to confront him. "Anyone want to try this combination with me?" he asked, knowing few would dare accept the challenge. Ryan wasn't just technically superior, he took pleasure in demonstrating that superiority in a humiliating way. 2 students volunteered and were easily dominated. It wasn't even a fair competition, it was more like a lion toying with its prey. The skill gap was glaring, and Ryan savored every moment. Sarah continued her work, cleaning the areas around the mats. But unlike other days, she couldn't help but pay full attention to what was happening. Her trained eyes analyzed the young man's every move. She saw the openings he left, the patterns he repeated, the small technical flaws that went unnoticed by others. "His base is off on the 3rd move," she thought, observing how he distributed his body weight. "And he always telegraphs the high kick with the same shoulder movement." They were microscopic details that only someone with deep knowledge and a keen eye could notice. Sarah had developed a clinical eye from years of watching professional fights in old videos, studying each technique as if it were a work of art. "Hey, Sarah!" Ryan's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Stop pretending to work and pay attention to a real lesson. You might learn something." Laughter echoed through the gym. Some of the younger students laughed openly, while others felt uncomfortable but said nothing. The head instructor, Master Chen, frowned but didn't intervene. Ryan was a major source of revenue for the dojo. "You know what?" Ryan continued, a cruel idea forming in his mind. "How about a little demonstration? Sarah, you want to learn martial arts for free?" The silence that followed was deafening. All movement ceased, all conversation stopped. It was as if someone had hit pause on the entire world. Sarah felt every eye on her. Some were curious, others pitiful, many simply waiting for a public humiliation that would serve as entertainment. She had known Ryan for 3 years. She knew exactly what kind of person he was. This offer had nothing to do with teaching. It was pure malice disguised as generosity. "That's not necessary," she replied calmly, returning to her cleaning. "Oh, come on. I insist. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. When else are you going to get to train with a national champion? Let's go, people. Let's give our favorite employee some encouragement." The taunt was working exactly as he'd planned. Other students began to join in, some genuinely thinking it would be fun, others just going with the flow to avoid challenging the dojo's social hierarchy. "Come on, Sarah, it'll be fun." "It's a great chance. Ryan's a great teacher." She knew that refusing again would be seen as cowardice, and accepting would be walking straight into a trap. Ryan had no intention of teaching. He just wanted a human training dummy to demonstrate his technical superiority. But something inside her was different that day. Maybe it was the accumulation of 3 years of small humiliations. Maybe it was the memory of Lily asking why she always came home looking sad. Or maybe it was simply the moment when years of secret training found the right time to emerge. "All right," she said, setting her cloth aside and walking to the center of the mat. "But just one quick round. I have work to finish." "Ubi!" The reaction was immediate. Some applauded excitedly, others made comments about what was about to happen. Ryan smiled with cruel satisfaction, already imagining how he would turn the next few minutes into a lesson she would never forget. Master Chen approached, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "Ryan, maybe this isn't a good idea. She has no experience. She could get hurt." "Relax. Master, I'll go easy on her. It'll just be a friendly demonstration." But the glint in his eyes said otherwise. Sarah stood in the center of the mat, and for the first time in 3 years, all eyes in the dojo were truly on her. Not as the invisible woman who cleaned the corners, but as someone about to step into a combat arena. She wore her simple custodian's uniform, navy blue pants, and a white t-shirt with the cleaning company's logo. Nothing that hinted at any martial arts knowledge. Her sneakers were old but comfortable, suitable for long hours on her feet. Ryan, in contrast, wore his immaculate GI, his black belt tied neatly with all the stripes indicating his years of dedication. The visual difference was stark. It looked like David versus Goliath if David didn't know he was David. "You can take your shoes off if you want," he offered, feigning kindness. "It's safer on the mat barefoot." "Thanks, but I'm fine like this." The simple, direct answer surprised some in the room. There was a calmness in her voice that didn't match someone about to face a clearly superior opponent. "All right then," Ryan said, assuming a basic guard stance. "I'll show you a few basic moves. You try to defend, and I'll go slow so you don't get hurt." He moved slowly, completely telegraphing a straight punch that any child could see coming. It was a condescending demonstration, designed to make it look like she was learning something while he was in complete control. Sarah dodged the punch with a smooth, almost casual sidestep. Nothing spectacular, but technically correct. "Very good. See how easy that is? Now I'll try a low kick, nice and slow." Again, the move was slow and telegraphed. Sarah simply raised her leg, blocking the kick with her shin in a way that showed a basic understanding of defense. Some spectators applauded, thinking she was doing surprisingly well for a beginner. Ryan smirked, satisfied with his own patience and teaching ability. "Now I'll try something a little faster, but nothing crazy." That's when something changed. The next move came with real speed, a punch that, while not at full force, was definitely no longer an educational demonstration. Ryan had decided it was time to show the real difference between them. Sarah didn't just dodge, she contracted her body, let the fist pass inches from her face, and in one fluid motion positioned herself at a perfect angle for a counterattack. But she didn't attack, she simply returned to a neutral stance. The movement was so fast and precise that most people didn't even notice. But Ryan did. His eyes narrowed slightly. That hadn't been luck. "Interesting," he muttered. "You've got natural reflexes. Let's test them a little more." What followed was a gradual but noticeable shift in intensity. Ryan began to move more seriously, probing the limits of the woman in front of him. Each strike came a little faster, each technique a little more elaborate, and Sarah responded to every attack with a precision that was starting to draw attention. Her movements weren't flashy, but they were efficient. She wasted no energy, made no unnecessary motions. It was like watching someone solve a complex math problem with silent elegance. "How is she keeping up with him?" whispered one of the younger students. Master Chen watched with growing interest. His years of experience allowed him to see details that others missed. The woman wasn't just reacting on instinct, she was reading his movements, anticipating and responding with real technical knowledge. Where could she have learned this? The master thought. Ryan, for his part, was starting to get slightly annoyed. What should have been a humiliating demonstration was turning into something else. She wasn't being dominated as he'd expected. Worse, some of his most basic techniques were being neutralized with an ease that suggested real knowledge. "Let's take it up a notch," he said, and this time there was no pretense in his voice. What was about to happen would change everything at the Dragon's Den dojo. The atmosphere in the dojo had changed drastically. What began as a cruel joke was turning into something serious. Ryan completely dropped the pretense of it being a lesson and assumed a real combat stance. His first attack came in a flurry, a three-punch combination he used in competitions. Jab, cross, hook, fast, precise movements with the clear intention of ending the game and re-establishing the natural order of things. Sarah moved like water. The first punch passed through the space where her head had been a second before. The second was deflected with a rotation of her torso so subtle it looked choreographed. The third never even reached its target. She had moved to an angle where his arm couldn't reach her. A murmur went through the crowd. This was definitely not luck. "What the hell?" Ryan muttered, taking a few steps back. For the first time, he looked at her not as the custodian he used to taunt, but as a real opponent. His eyes searched for signs of formal training, characteristic scars, specific calluses, any indication of where she might have learned to move like that. "Where did you learn that?" he asked, trying to keep his tone casual, but with a new tension in his voice. "By watching," she replied simply. The answer infuriated him. It was impossible to learn martial arts just by watching. It took years of practice, discipline, constant correction of movements. No one developed that kind of timing and precision just by observing. "By watching," he repeated sarcastically. "Right, let's see if you've watched enough." What followed was a true display of why Ryan was considered one of the best in the region. He abandoned any pretense of gentleness and began to fight for real. Complex combinations, level changes, takedown attempts. It was an impressive technical arsenal, executed with the precision of someone who had dedicated his entire life to the art. And Sarah answered everything, not in a spectacular or dominant way, but with an efficiency that bordered on the impossible. Every attack was neutralized with the minimum necessary movement. Every takedown attempt was defended with perfect positioning. She didn't counterattack, she only defended, but she did so with a mastery that made it clear this was not just passive defense. The audience was completely silent now. Even the most inexperienced students could see they were witnessing something extraordinary. The woman who cleaned their mats every day was facing the best fighter in the dojo, toe to toe. Master Chen moved closer to the mat, his eyes fixed on every movement. 40 years of martial arts experience told him this woman was no lucky amateur. There was method, strategy, and deep knowledge in every decision she made. "Impossible," he whispered to himself. Ryan was starting to sweat, not just from physical exertion, but from growing frustration. Nothing he tried worked. It was like fighting his own shadow, always one step behind, always reacting instead of setting the pace. In his rising anger, he made the first real mistake. A high kick that was too ambitious, executed with more force than precision. Sarah didn't just dodge, she moved inside his guard and for the first time did something other than defend. It wasn't an attack, it was a touch. Her hands landed on two specific points on his body, one on his chest, the other on his hip, and she applied minimal pressure, just enough to off-balance him. Ryan stumbled and nearly fell. The silence that followed was absolute. Not even the sound of Ryan's heavy breathing could break the tension that had settled over the dojo. "How?" he started to say, but couldn't finish the sentence. For the first time in years, Ryan didn't know what to say or do. The woman he had underestimated, humiliated and provoked for so long, stood there, calm and serene, demonstrating a knowledge he couldn't comprehend. "I think that's enough for today," Sarah said gently, moving away from the center of the mat. "I have work to finish." But Ryan wasn't willing to let it go. His ego, his reputation, everything he had worked for was being questioned by a custodian, and that was unacceptable. "No, it's not over," Ryan said, his voice laced with an intensity that made everyone in the dojo tense up. "It can't end like this." Sarah stopped halfway, her back to him, still trying to de-escalate the situation. She could feel the shift in the room's energy. What had started as a demonstration had turned into something more dangerous. "Ryan, that's enough," Master Chen finally intervened. It's gone on long enough." "No!" the young fighter exploded. "Don't you understand? This woman has been making a fool out of me for 3 years, pretending to be just a janitor, watching our training, copying our techniques. It's dishonest." The accusation shot through the dojo. Some students glanced at each other, confused. Others began to murmur, trying to process what they were seeing and hearing. Sarah turned around slowly, and for the first time since the confrontation began, there was a different expression on her face. Not anger, but a deep sadness mixed with a determination she had kept hidden for a long time. "Dishonest?" she repeated, her voice still calm but filled with a restrained emotion. "Dishonest is humiliating someone every day just because you can. Dishonest is using your position to make others feel small." "You have no right to talk to me like that," Ryan shouted, taking a step toward her. "You're just a what?" Sarah interrupted, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. "A woman, a single mother, a janitor." Finish the sentence. The silence that followed was as heavy as lead. Ryan opened his mouth to answer, but the words wouldn't come. For the first time, he realized how his actions must have looked to others. "I work 12 hours a day to support my daughter," Sarah continued, each word measured and precise. "I wake up at 4 in the morning, clean offices before coming here, spend all day here listening to taunts, and then I go to another job until 9 at night. And do you know why I do it all? Because I have a daughter who needs me." Some of the younger spectators lowered their heads, clearly uncomfortable. They had never stopped to think about the life of the woman who kept the place clean so they could train. "And in the few free moments I have," she went on, "I study, I watch videos, I practice moves, because martial arts give me the strength to face people like you every day. Not to impress anyone, not to prove anything, just to remind myself that I'm stronger than you think." Ryan was visibly shaken. The woman he had targeted for 3 years was revealing herself not only as a technically superior opponent, but as a person whose character put him to shame. I didn't know," he stammered. "Of course you didn't know," Sarah replied, but without cruelty in her voice. "You never cared to know. To you, I was always just part of the scenery, something to be cleaned up after you were done playing." Master Chen stepped forward, his decades of experience finally finding a voice. "Sarah," he said respectfully, "may I ask where you trained formally?" She looked him directly in the eye before answering. "I never trained formally. Everything I know I learned by watching, studying, and practicing on my own. My teacher was necessity, and my dojo was life." The revelation struck everyone like a bolt of lightning. The idea that someone could develop that level of skill without formal training challenged everything they believed about martial arts. "That's impossible," Ryan said, but his voice now lacked its former arrogance. "It's impossible for someone who's never had to truly fight for anything," she replied. "When you have to be strong every single day, not just during practice, you learn things no dojo can teach." She picked up her cleaning cloth and turned to leave the mat, but Ryan intercepted her one more time. "Wait," he said, and for the first time, his voice sounded different. "One last thing, no games, no taunts, a real match, you and me for real. I need to know." "Know what?" "Know if everything I've worked for is worth anything." Sarah studied him for a long moment, seeing not the arrogant bully, but a young man whose entire identity was being called into question. "Are you sure?" Ryan nodded, and everyone in the dojo could see that this time there was no ego involved. It was a genuine search for answers. "Then so be it," she said. What happened in the next few minutes would be remembered by everyone in the dojo for the rest of their lives. Sarah and Ryan positioned themselves again in the center of the mat, but this time the energy was completely different. There were no more taunts, no audience eager for entertainment. It was simply two people who needed to discover something important about themselves. Ryan assumed his classic fighting stance: high guard, solid base, focused gaze. It was the same stance that had earned him dozens of victories in regional and national competitions. Sarah simply stood, relaxed, with her arms at her sides. To an inexperienced observer, she looked completely unprepared. But Master Chen recognized the posture. It was that of someone ready to react to anything from any direction. "Whenever you're ready," she said calmly. Ryan studied his opponent for a few seconds, looking for patterns, tells, any sign that might give him an advantage. But Sarah was simply there, present, waiting. He attacked with a combination he had practiced thousands of times: jab, cross, low kick, fast, precise movements, executed with all the technique that years of training had given him. Sarah moved as if she were dancing. There were no dramatic blocks or spectacular dodges. She simply wasn't where the strikes were aimed. It was like trying to punch the rain, always a second too late, always in the wrong place. Ryan intensified his attacks. More complex combinations, level changes, clinch attempts. Everything he had learned in his years of dedication to martial arts was employed with total seriousness. And nothing worked. It wasn't that Sarah was faster. She was smarter. It wasn't that she was stronger. She was more efficient. Every move Ryan made was read, anticipated, and neutralized with a precision that seemed almost supernatural. "How is she doing that?" whispered one of the more experienced students. Master Chen watched, fascinated. In 4 decades of martial arts, he had seen many different styles, many different approaches, but he had never witnessed anything like this. Sarah wasn't following any specific school. She was improvising in real time, using fundamental principles to create unique solutions for each situation. "It's pure," the master murmured to himself. "No bad habits, no stylistic limitations. It's martial art in its purest form." Ryan began to show signs of frustration. Sweat poured down his face, not just from physical exertion, but from the psychological pressure of being unable to land a single clean blow. His movements began to lose precision, to become more telegraphed. It was then that Sarah made her first real offensive move. It wasn't an explosive or spectacular attack. It was subtle, almost imperceptible. As Ryan executed a roundhouse kick, she took a step to the side and applied minimal pressure at the exact point where he had overcommitted his balance. Ryan stumbled, fought to stay upright, and ended up on one knee. The audience held its breath. "Get up," Sarah said gently, offering a hand to help him. But Ryan didn't take it. He got up on his own, his face red not just from exertion, but from the humiliation of being taken down by someone he had considered inferior for so long. "Again," he said, his voice hoarse. "Ryan!" Master Chen began. "Again!" he yelled, tears of frustration beginning to well in his eyes. Sarah studied him with a compassionate expression. She could see this was no longer about martial arts. It was about identity, about self-worth, about everything he believed in crumbling before his eyes. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Why is this so important to you?" "Because it's all I have," Ryan exploded. "It's all I am. If I'm not good at this, then I'm nothing." The words echoed through the dojo like a cry of pain. Everyone could see that behind the arrogance, the inflated ego, was a deeply insecure young man who had built his entire identity on being superior to others. Sarah approached him, and for the first time since the confrontation began, she gently touched his shoulder. "You're wrong," she said. "Being good at martial arts isn't all you are, and it doesn't determine your worth as a person." "How can you say that?" he asked, genuinely confused. "Because I've learned something that no dojo teaches," Sarah replied. "I've learned that true strength doesn't come from how many people you can defeat. It comes from how many times you get back up after being knocked down." Sarah's words echoed through the silent dojo. Ryan looked at her with an expression that mixed confusion, defeat, and something he couldn't quite identify. For the first time in years, someone had seen through the facade he had so carefully constructed. "I don't understand," he mumbled, still trying to process what had happened. "How did you... Where does all this come from?" Sarah sighed, looking around the dojo that had been her workplace and, secretly, her school for so long. "Do you really want to know the whole story?" Ryan nodded, as did several of the onlookers who had moved closer, genuinely curious about the woman who had surprised them all. 15 years ago, I was married to a man who used his fists to settle every argument. I learned to read movements not to fight, but to survive. I learned to anticipate, to dodge, to find weak points not for sport, but out of necessity. The silence in the dojo deepened. Some of the younger students looked at each other, beginning to understand the true origin of her extraordinary skill. When I finally managed to leave that relationship, I was pregnant with Lily, alone, with no money, no family to help me. I got this job and thought I would finally be safe. She paused, watching Ryan's face, which now showed something close to shame. But I discovered there are many kinds of violence, not just physical. There's the violence of contempt, of constant humiliation, of making someone feel invisible and worthless. Ryan lowered his head, unable to meet her gaze. So, I started watching the training sessions, not to copy or steal techniques, but because I saw something here I always wanted: strength, discipline, respect. I saw men and women who channeled their strength into something constructive, not destructive. Master Chen approached, his expression showing genuine respect and interest. "And you taught yourself all of this?" he asked. "I had a very strict teacher," Sarah replied with a sad smile. "Necessity, when you have to be strong every day to raise a daughter alone, when you have to maintain your dignity while being treated as if you're invisible, you learn to find strength in places you never knew existed." She looked directly at Ryan. "You guys train for 2 hours a day and then go home. I practice 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Every real-life challenge is a sparring match. Every bill I have to pay is an opponent I have to beat. Every day I keep my daughter safe and happy is a victory." The words carried a weight that made everyone feel small. Not small in a humiliating way, but small in their understanding of how limited their own concept of strength and determination was. "That's why you never counter-attacked during our match," Ryan said, finally understanding. "You weren't trying to defeat me. You were trying to teach me something. What I wanted to teach you is that real strength has nothing to do with how many people you can dominate. It has to do with how many people you can lift up." Ryan was silent for a long moment, processing not just the words, but the entire life perspective they represented. Everything he had based his identity on, titles, victories, fear-based admiration, suddenly felt hollow and meaningless. "I spent 3 years taunting you," he said, his voice almost a whisper. 3 years doing the exact same thing you ran away from when you left that marriage. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. He had become the very type of person who caused others needless suffering. Why did you never say anything? Why didn't you ever defend yourself? Because I learned that some battles aren't worth fighting, and because I saw that behind all that aggression, you were fighting something inside yourself. Sarah picked up her cleaning cloth once more, indicating that for her, the conversation was over. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to finish, and a daughter at home waiting to hear about my day." But before she could step off the mat, Ryan called out to her one last time. "Sarah," he said, his voice filled with a sincerity that surprised even himself. "I'd like to apologize, and I'd like to learn, for real this time, not fighting techniques, but about real strength. She studied him for a moment, seeing not the arrogant young man, but someone who was genuinely ready to change. "I'll be here tomorrow at 5 in the morning. If you really want to learn, show up." The next day, when Sarah arrived at the dojo at 5 in the morning, she found a surprise. Ryan was there, sitting on the floor of the main mat, still in casual clothes. He looked as though he had been up all night, reflecting on everything that had happened. "You came," she said, genuinely surprised. "I promised I would, and I'm trying to be a man of my word lately." There was a humility in his voice she had never heard before. The arrogant young man from the day before seemed to have been replaced by someone who was genuinely willing to learn. "What exactly do you want to learn?" Sarah asked as she organized her cleaning supplies. "I thought a lot about what you said yesterday, about real strength, about lifting people up instead of dominating them. I think I spent so much time focused on being better than others that I never learned how to be better for others." Sarah stopped what she was doing and watched him closely. There was sincerity in his words, but she had learned to be cautious of sudden changes. "I see, but what does that have to do with martial arts?" "I want to learn how to use what I know to help, not to hurt. I want to understand how you turned something that could be violent into something that empowers you." It was a profound question, one that touched the very heart of martial philosophy. Sarah considered her answer carefully. "The first lesson is the hardest," she said finally. "You have to unlearn everything you think you know about what it means to be strong." "What do you mean?" "You were taught that strength is imposing your will on others, but true strength is having complete control over yourself, especially when you have the power to hurt someone and you choose not to." Ryan reflected on this as he watched her begin her morning routine. There was a grace to her movements, an economy of effort that demonstrated mastery not just in combat techniques, but in the art of living efficiently. "Can I help?" he asked, gesturing to the cleaning work. "You want to help clean the dojo?" "I want to learn everything. If this is part of your routine, it's part of the lesson." Sarah studied him for a moment, then handed him a cloth. "All right, first practical lesson. This job you always saw as beneath you is what keeps this place running. Every clean mat is a show of respect for everyone who will train here today." They worked in silence for a few minutes, Ryan discovering an unexpected meditation in the repetitive cleaning motions. "Second lesson," Sarah continued. "True discipline doesn't just happen during training. It happens when no one is watching, when you get no recognition for doing the right thing. How do you stay motivated when no one acknowledges your effort? Because recognition isn't the goal. The goal is becoming a person you respect when you look in the mirror." The words resonated deeply with Ryan. He had spent so much time seeking external validation that he had never considered finding satisfaction in his own growth. "Third lesson," Sarah said, pausing her work to demonstrate a simple move. "In martial arts and in life, you always have a choice. You can use your strength to dominate or to protect, to humiliate or to teach, to create fear or to inspire respect." She showed him a submission hold he recognized as very advanced, but she applied it with a gentleness that would cause no harm. The same technique can break an arm or simply control a movement. The difference isn't in the technique, it's in the intention of the person applying it. Ryan tried to mimic the move, but his hands still carried the tension of someone used to applying maximum force. "Relax," Sarah instructed. "Strength isn't tension. Tension is fear in disguise. When you're truly confident, you can be gentle and still be effective." They practiced for another hour, with Sarah teaching not just techniques, but an entirely different philosophy on the use of physical force. "Why are you doing this?" Ryan asked during a break. "After everything I did to you." "Because yesterday I saw something I recognized," Sarah answered. I saw someone who was lost and using force to hide his pain. I've been lost too. The difference is you have the chance to choose a different path. What if I can't? What if I can't change who I am? Sarah smiled, the first time he had seen her genuinely smile. Then you'll try again tomorrow and the day after that, until you do. 3 months had passed since that day in the dojo. The transformation was gradual, but visible to anyone paying attention. Ryan had become a dedicated student, not only of Sarah's techniques, but of her philosophy of life. Every day at 5 in the morning, he would arrive at the dojo and help with the cleaning before training began. At first, some of his peers made jokes about the champion-turned-janitor, but his consistency and seriousness gradually changed their perceptions. "Good morning, Sarah," he greeted on a particularly cold June morning, cloth already in hand. "Good morning. How are you feeling with the technique we practiced yesterday?" "Still difficult. Controlling my strength is harder than just applying it." "That's normal. You spent years training to maximize impact. Now you're learning to maximize control. It's a complete reprogramming." They began their morning routine, which had become a shared meditation. During these moments, Ryan learned lessons no martial arts manual could teach. "Sarah," he said during a break, "can I ask a personal question?" "You can." "How did you forgive? I mean, how did you really forgive? Not just say you did, but feel at peace with everything that happened?" It was a question she had been expecting for weeks. Ryan had matured enough to ask the truly important questions. "Forgiveness isn't a one-time event," she explained. "It's a daily choice. Every morning I wake up and choose not to carry the anger from the day before, not because the people who hurt me deserve forgiveness, but because I deserve peace. And when the anger comes back, it always does, the difference is now I know it doesn't have to control me. I can feel it, acknowledge it, and then choose what to do with it." Ryan absorbed these words like water in a desert. Since he was a child, he had been taught that anger was strength, that holding grudges was a form of protection. Discovering there were alternatives was fundamentally changing his perspective on himself. "There's something I'd like to show you," Sarah said, walking over to her locker. She pulled out a simple white belt, without any adornment or rank markings. "This belonged to my father. He practiced martial arts his whole life, but was never interested in colored belts or competitions. He said the real rank was invisible. It was in how you treated people when you had power over them." Ryan touched the worn fabric with reverence. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I want you to have it." The statement caught him completely off guard. His hands trembled slightly as he held the belt. "I can't accept this, not after." "Precisely because of what happened," Sarah interrupted. "My father used to say that the belt doesn't represent what you already are, but what you are striving to become." Ryan felt tears well up in his eyes. In recent months, he had discovered that crying wasn't weakness, but a healthy way to process emotions. "Sarah, I need to tell you something." "I'm listening." "Last week, one of the new students was being picked on by a group of senior members. The old me would have joined in or just ignored it. But this time, what did you do? I taught him the evasion techniques you taught me, not so he could fight back, but so he could protect himself. And I talked to the others about respect." Sarah smiled, seeing that the seeds she had planted were finally blooming. "And how did that feel?" "For the first time in years, I felt truly proud. Not proud of beating someone, but proud of helping someone." "That's the difference between being admired and being respected," Sarah said. "Admiration based on fear is temporary. Respect based on character lasts forever." Ryan tied the white belt around his waist, knowing it represented not an end, but a new beginning. "Sarah," he said, "thank you for everything, for showing me there was a different way." "The way was always there," she replied. "You just needed someone to show you where to look." In that moment, They both knew that something fundamental had changed, not just in Ryan, but in the entire atmosphere of the dojo. 6 months after the confrontation that changed everything, the Dragon's Den dojo was a completely different place. The transformation had started with Ryan, but it had spread like ripples in a pond. Sarah was on the main mat, no longer just as a custodian, but as an official instructor. Master Chen had insisted she take the position, recognizing that her knowledge and philosophy were exactly what the dojo needed. Remember, she told a class of beginners, the goal isn't to never fall, the goal is to learn to get up with more wisdom each time you do. Ryan was among the students, not because he needed the technical lessons, but because he still had much to learn about the philosophical application of martial arts. His presence there was no longer that of a champion who couldn't show weakness, but of someone genuinely committed to continuous growth. "Instructor Sarah," said one of the youngest students, Anna, "how do we know when we're really ready to apply what we've learned?" "Good question, Anna. You're ready when your first reaction isn't to show what you know, but to consider if you need to show anything at all." The answer prompted silent reflection among the students. It was the kind of wisdom that could only come from someone who had learned through real experience, not just controlled training. After class, Ryan approached her for a conversation he had been planning for weeks. "Sarah, I have something important to tell you." "I'm listening." "I received an offer to fight in an international tournament, one of the biggest of my career." Sarah watched him closely, looking for signs of how he was processing this opportunity. "And how do you feel about it?" 6 months ago, I would have accepted immediately. It would have been about proving I'm the best, about dominating opponents, about feeding my ego. And now?" Ryan paused to choose his words carefully. "Now I'm asking myself what the real purpose is. If I accept, it will be to test my growth, to represent this dojo and the values I've learned here with dignity. It will be about respecting my opponents while giving it my all." Sarah smiled, seeing that the young man had internalized lessons that many take decades to learn. "It sounds like you already have your answer. Actually, I want to ask your opinion. Do you think I'm ready? Not technically, I know I am, but emotionally, philosophically." It was a profound question, one that showed a maturity the old Ryan would never have possessed. "I'll ask you a question back," Sarah said. "If you lose this fight, how will you react?" "I'll analyze what I need to improve, congratulate my opponent with genuine respect, and keep training. And if you win, I'll celebrate with humility, be grateful for the opportunity to test my growth, and look for ways to use any recognition to help others." Sarah nodded, satisfied with his answers. "Then you're ready. Not because you'll never make mistakes again, but because you've developed the wisdom to learn from them." Just then, Lily walked into the dojo. Now 13, she had become a regular presence, often helping with administrative tasks or simply watching the training sessions. "Mom, can I talk to you?" "Of course, sweetheart. I want to start training here officially. Not just watching, but really learning." Sarah and Ryan exchanged a look. They both knew Lily had absorbed a lot just by observing, but the formal request represented something deeper. "Why do you want to train?" Sarah asked. "Because I see how martial arts has changed, not just the way you move, but the way you live. I want that wisdom too." It was a mature answer for someone so young, a reflection of a home where philosophy and practice went hand in hand. "Ryan," Sarah said, "would you like to help teach Lily's first class?" "It would be an honor," he replied, understanding the symbolic importance of the moment. As they prepared the space for Lily's first official lesson, Sarah reflected on how life had come full circle. What had started as humiliation and confrontation had transformed into growth, community, and hope for the future. You know, she said to Ryan, sometimes the greatest victories don't happen in tournaments or competitions. They happen when we manage to turn our pain into wisdom and our wisdom into service to others. Ryan nodded, understanding that the woman he had tried to humiliate years ago had become his most important teacher. And there, in a dojo once ruled by arrogance, something far more powerful was now flourishing, the true strength that comes from lifting others up instead of knocking them down. Did you enjoy this story? Leave a like to show me you appreciate this kind of inspiring content. Share it with someone who needs to hear about second chances and true strength. And let me know in the comments, what was the most important lesson you took away from Sarah and Ryan's journey until the next story?